Paradise is Hulu's critically acclaimed addictive drama series starring Sterling K. Brown, Julianne Nicholson, and James Marsden. A serene community is rocked by a shocking murder and the high-stakes investigation that follows. Filled with nail-biting twists and turns, the Daily Beast calls Paradise your next TV obsession, and the New York Times says it's exhilarating in all the right ways. Paradise is for your Emmy consideration in all categories, including Outstanding Drama Series, and for more information, visit fyc.hulu.com.
How does Ryan Murphy talk to you about?
How does Ryan Murphy talk to you?
End of question.
He doesn't like when people imitate him, so I'm not going to do that.
That's true.
Hey everybody, I'm Kelvin Washington, and welcome to The Envelope. Alongside, the usuals, Ivan Villarreal, also Mark Olson, and we're excited about this one because, as you know, Emmy season is upon us, so therefore it is time for us to kind of give our takes on who we're looking at, some folks we're kind of hoping are contenders, maybe some shows as well, maybe some off-the-wall picks. Mark, I'll start with you. Who you got?
Well, I have to say, I am hoping for either Hot Ones or Everybody's Live with John Mulaney in the Best Talk series. That's a category that it's really dominated by the sort of traditional talk shows. I'm a huge talk show aficionado. But these two shows that are like eligible in the category are just so unusual and unconventional. And I think it just brings so much energy to what a lot of times can seem like a very we know who's going to win. It's going to be a guy named Jimmy, kind of thing.
That's a good point with the Hot Ones. I mean, it's getting just as big of people as the more traditional night shows. So you can see it's kind of paving the way for what can be in this new streaming and social media world. Yvonne,
why don't we have our own shtick like that, like Hot Wings or something? Why didn't we come up with that?
Well, first of all, okay, since we're there, what's the level of hot are we going? Let's say 0 to 5.
5?
Out of 5.
I think a 3.
A 3?
Mark?
Yeah, medium.
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 I don't like
That's
it
a good
too hot.
number, medium, 3 out of 5. Yeah, I'm with 3. I'll go 3. That's as far as I go. What shows or maybe even actors and actresses are you looking at?
It sort of ties together because some of these people may end up in a hospital from the heat factor. I have to say I'm really hoping to see The Pit or Noah Wyle specifically get some recognition, and I have a strong feeling that they will be. I mean, this is a show everyone's been talking about. And it's on Max, but it sort of harkens back to like the old school sort of broadcast kind of drama. The hook though is that the season is 15 episodes and it chronicles 1 hour of a shift, and I thought that was really innovative. So I hope that gets recognition. I will also say, I kind of hope we don't forget about Presumed Innocent. That was the Apple TV series. Yep. There was another adaptation of Scott Turo's novel of the same name from David E. Kelley. It starred Jake Gyllenhaal, and I really hope people don't forget about that one.
I know I always say this, but yeah, I find the sort of Emmy eligibility window so much more for some reason, like the Oscars is just sort of like what came out last year, but the Emmys, it's such a specific and strange thing, and it's so easy to forget about shows from a while ago because you do get so lost in things that have just come out, that are still coming out, or like this confusion of like which season of what show are we talking about?
It's where we've gotten to, and maybe it's a compliment to the genre, just where we are with television, because of streaming, more traditional television, is that we're now in a place where the look you get, oh, you haven't seen? We're in that phase now. You don't watch White Lotus. You don't what? You're like, I'm sorry, I haven't caught up on that one. It just you can get ostracized from a friend, some chat groups.
Yeah. Seriously.
There's only so many hours in the day.
Say that again for people. Okay, because again, the judgment I get, I'm picking up my coffee. For real quick, for me, the show's solid. I won't say the show necessarily, but him, and I think he'll get a little love, Sterling K. Brown in Paradise. Like, he himself, the show's good. I've enjoyed it, but I could see it not necessarily getting all the rave. But him, I think it's been good to kind of see, could he take a role, lead a show? And I've enjoyed him in that one.
There's nothing he can't do. He's good in almost everything.
Yeah, absolutely been great to see him in this. So let's go here. Yvonne, we'll start with you. Cooper Koch and Nicholas Alexander Chavez. You had a chance to sit down with them. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so both actors portray Eric and Lyle Menendez, respectively, in the Netflix true crime series Monsters, the Eric and Lyle Menendez story. The actors play Eric and Lyle Menendez, who were thrust into the spotlight in the late 80s and early 90s for the killing of their parents. This was like wall to wall coverage. I remember it as a young child, just seeing like it would overtake a lot of my children's programming, a lot of interruptions, court TV. It was an interesting take on this case. You saw a lot of different perspectives, some controversial, but it's really been sort of in the ether right now because the resentencing happened where the brothers are now, they got resentenced, so there's a possibility of parole for them, and we got into a little bit about where things stand right now.
Yeah, again, it just so many people who maybe even younger than when the case happened in the late 80s who are now infatuated with it, just because of everything. They're like, oh my gosh, how did I miss this? I wasn't a kid when this was happening. Mark, turn to you. You had, of course, Diego Luna, Andor. Tell us some more.
We were able to catch Diego as he was on his way to LAX for a flight out of the country at the end of a very long press tour that he's been doing for Andor. I think this new season of the show with showrunner Tony Gilroy has just felt like a real achievement. It takes on espionage, wartime thriller, also a Star Wars story, but also very much about how revolutions start and the kind of people that, set those sort of events in motion. And Diego's been so involved in the production of the show, the sort of the storytelling of the show, besides just being the lead actor. Like, I think, this began as a role that he played in the film Rogue One. And so now for basically 10 years, he's been playing this role on and off. And I think it just captures so much of what's great about him as a performer. And so this has really just become one of the signature roles of his career.
And all everybody at my other job talks about. I mean, my gosh, she's in the background, all the chatter. That's everybody just bringing that show up. So I definitely put it on the list of must-see for me. All right, well, without further ado, let's get this episode started.
Cooper Nicholas, thanks for being with me today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
It's hard not to begin with the recent news, which is that after more than 35 years in prison for the killing of their parents, Eric and Lyle Menendez were resentenced to 50 years to life, which means they will be granted a parole hearing in the near future. Cooper, I know you've been to one of the hearings. Can you talk to me about why it was important for you to be there?
It's just important to me because I just care about them so much, and I had never met the family, and they're not usually here. They don't live here. So it was a good opportunity to go and just show my support and meet Tammy and Talia and Anna Maria and just all of the family, which was intense, but also lovely. And it was really, really nice.
What stood out to you about that experience? Because we're so used to watching it from a distance. And I'm curious for you, after inhabiting the character for so long, to sort of be in something in the moment. What was that like?
It's pretty trippy, honestly. Like being in the courtroom and they're like talking about the case and the prosecutors are making their points. And then it was really strange and surreal. But I felt so lucky and just happy to be there so I could, just show my support. And yes, it was trippy for sure.
Because do you feel like you're watching it as yourself? Or
Or I'm like,
Eric?
I studied this stuff. Like I lived it. I lived this in a fake way, maybe even like a real way, because, you really sort of dive in. So yeah, it was surreal and weird and fascinating also to just listen to what they were saying and just how different it was in the 90s compared to now.
Nicholas, did you expect to connect so closely with this case after you wrapped? And how were you sort of taking in the news as it happened?
Yeah, I think it's, you get into being an artist, and you hope to be a part of some projects that have significant reach and impact people. And then, retrospectively about your career, like you'd hope to be a part of maybe 2 or 3 small handful of projects that actually have social impact. And so to be a part of this limited series that repositioned a 30-year-old case, you know what I mean, and made people see it in a different light, but just to be a part of something that like repositions it in the minds of everyone and then ultimately results in them getting a resentencing, and now it's up to the parole board. But it's remarkable. It's a remarkable experience as an artist. Yeah.
For both of you, this was the first time you were portraying real people. Do I have that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you wrap your head around something like that, knowing that this is such a well-known case and you're going to be asked to speak so, for lack of a better word, intelligently about it? Like, people are going to want your opinions, people are going to want to know your thoughts on what happened. That's a lot to take on, in addition to just understanding the character and how you're going to approach it. How did you navigate that, of like, how do I express myself and talk about this in a way that's appropriate and uh, shedding light on this case?
I think just from the beginning, I've known about it for such a long time and I've cared about them for such a long time that it wasn't difficult for me to have a very strong point of view and a place that I sat in really confidently in just my beliefs and my empathy and my care. And I think regardless of whether they were real people or not, I always want to do that with the people that I play. I always want to know where they're coming from and understand them and 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 care deeply for them, because it's just like the only way that I think I know how to work. So in terms of talking about it, I'm just like, I'm the crazy like Leslie Abramson defender. Like if anyone comes over to me and they're like, well, but they did this. So I'm like, well, actually they did this because, I get kind of crazy. But I like that. I'm passionate about it. And so in that sense, it's nice to have such a strong point of view, opinion.
I had a bit of a different way in and a different way of handling it. Lyle and Eric went through similar challenges, but they're ultimately very, very different people and they're presented very differently within the series. I had to kind of create a separation in terms of the way that I handled it artistically and then the way that I talked about it. For me, it was about creating a high level of empathy with the character and understanding what his perspective would have been, what motivated him to do what he did, the kind of trauma that he experienced, what it might be like to be someone who's mentally and emotionally stunted at 8, 9, 10 years old and then still feels the responsibility of behaving like his dad, right? Like that's almost in one box. And then they have this other box, which is the way that we talk about it, right? In all the press and in all the interviews and things like that we've done, it's been really important to me to sort of remain neutral, because so much of what our show talks about is the way that media has an impact on our justice system. I mean, that's what like the back 3 or 4 episodes are really a big part of what it's about. And we talk a lot about, not wanting to tip the scales. I mean, it's something that I felt personally that I didn't want to tip the scales in any of the interviews that I gave. Because ultimately I think that it's a jury of one's own peers, you know what I mean? Not the court of public opinion, right? And so that was just the stance that I took on it, right? Like I had to develop 2 very, very different buckets of thinking and ways of navigating in order to handle like the artistic side of this as well as like the interview side of it.
Well, let's start at the beginning. I want to talk about the audition process. I didn't know that you lived near the house where the events happened during the process.
Yeah, not quite a stone's throw, but pretty close.
Pretty close.
Like close enough that I could walk.
Okay. And you visited it during your like process of auditioning. Tell me about that.
Yeah, that's correct. I would take daily walks to the house, and I don't know what I thought that would give me. I think that maybe I just thought that I could feel some sort of spiritual connection with the space. I mean, maybe you've had a similar experience to this where like you just know that spaces carry energy with them. And so I would just go and I would sit in front of the house, and then I would just try to create in my mind's eye, like, and know that all of these things actually happened at this house, not some other house, at this house that I'm standing in front of. And that was really heavy and took a few days of walking to the house to even begin to process. But yeah, I was just trying to align myself with the story, with the people, with the place as intimately as I possibly could from as early as I possibly could in the process.
Did you see other people doing it? I know since the show aired, more people have gone, but were you seeing tour buses when you were there or
It's
anything?
interesting you asked that question. No, I think that it had largely been left alone, and I didn't see any other psychotic actors doing what I was doing. But
I know. I'm surprised you didn't see me.
Did you?
I was there.
You were there?
I was there, girl.
yeah, we talked about that some.
We were passing ships. in
Wait,
the night.
really? Tell me.
I went a couple times. There was one time where I went and because I was doing the same thing. I just wanted. It makes it feel more real if you're there.
So Cooper's the other psychotic actor that was there.
Yeah. Well, luckily we were the ones that got the parts.
Well, makes sense.
Kismet. Uh-huh.
But yeah, I went one time and I was parked outside, just kind of like watching, and there was a dog groomer's truck that pulled in, and I guess they were getting whoever was living there at the time was getting their dogs groomed, and this woman walks out of the front door with the dogs to give them to the groomers or whatever, and I was like, okay, like this is my shot. Like I'm gonna walk over, and I walk over, and I'm like sort of standing there, and I'm like, hello, and she's like, sort of looks at me weird, and I was like, can I talk to you? Or I was like, hi, this is so crazy, but like I'm auditioning to like play one of the brothers, and I was just wondering, like, are the owners home? Like, is there any way I could talk to them, or could I? And she was like, she just looked at me and was just like, no, and didn't even say anything, but was just like, I was like, okay, and then I left, and I was like, all right, well, worth a shot.
We did get to visit the house while we were in production, though,
We did end up getting to go through it,
which was an experience.
Tell me.
It's massive.
Yeah.
Like it structurally was similar to the set, but I mean the ceilings were huge. The rooms were massive. Like the upstairs room that was Kitty and Jose's room was like a hotel lobby. Like there was a whole living room in it. That's the one thing that I remember the most about it. Was
The
just
living room's huge. And
massive.
a lot of it's been redone, but I mean, it still bears some pretty striking similarities. And like Lyle's guest house, like that's all still there in the back. I mean, renovated, but it's all still there.
I think it really spoke to how wealthy they were. The hugeness of the house was like bigger than I thought it was. Like it was, yeah. And there was energy there. There was, some interesting.
Did you go in the room?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And another
Surprisingly, there wasn't that.
You
I
didn't
didn't
feel the
really
juju
feel
there.
much in there, actually.
Where did you feel it?
So for me, what was freaky was some of the artwork that the owner had hung up there. I know you probably remember this, but they
Yes.
showed us some of the paintings. They were these like really nice oil paintings. And there was this one of this woman, which would have been a creepy painting in and of itself, but the oil had melted in such a way where it
Just
had
randomly.
streaked tears through the woman's eyes as though she was crying. And like they said that they brought in like art experts and stuff like that who had said, no, the house is like in perfect condition. Like there's no reason that like the climate would have caused the painting to do this. So something very, very weird happened. I mean, for it to streak through her eyes and make it look like tears, that's insane.
Yeah, it was spooky. I think for me, where I felt it the most was in the backyard. There's a pool where there used to be a tennis court. And we went outside for the first time, and I remember standing there, and I just felt really emotional because of all of the times that I just could feel all of the times that that both of them had been playing tennis there, and just the trauma that place sort of.
The intensity.
Yeah. So, yeah, it was intense, but also really, yeah. And in Eric's room, I felt very, just kind of sad and just like, but ultimately it was. I'm glad we got to do that.
There's so much source material, whether, news clips or books or audio. I know I get overwhelmed. I like to go through everything when I'm writing a story, but at a certain point I have to tell myself, chill out. Like, you can only do so much. How was it for you to mine through all that? And were there specific things that really helped you latch on to Eric and Lyle?
Several books written about them, but then there's also the court TV footage, right? And that's where you get a lot of their behavior from. And then outside of that, there's not a lot of video. You know what I mean? Like that's where the vast majority of it is. I'd say like old photos really, really help. I mean, like they really come to life. Like they're the souls of like their family, and like you can also pick up their relationship in some of those old photos. But the court TV footage was interesting, right? Because like you have to be cognizant of the fact that people present a certain way when
Yeah.
they're on trial, right? You know, like it's a pretty unnatural situation to be in where you're on trial for your life for murdering your parents because you were sexually abused, right? And so like the way that you talk and the way that you present yourself, it's different than the way that we would or having a conversation or people meeting on the street. And so I tried to be cognizant of that and then balance that behavior with everything that I had read, with people who I had talked to who knew the family, because, you know, the dad was in the entertainment industry and they're kind of
Right.
steeped within the Los Angeles's infrastructure. So understanding what the behavior truly was came as a mixture of like the court TV footage and then all the other research that I had to meld together with that.
His voice was very important to me because he's very small. He's kind of stutters. He speaks with a lot of tension in his mouth. His shoulders are forward. All of that behavior I wanted to implement so that I could support that what he was saying happened to him was the truth. And I really just did believe that the person that was on the stand was him. I really believe that is who he was. And especially there even are some times in the testimony where he smiles or he laughs, or I can't remember exactly like what the moment is, but there's a moment where Lester Kuriyama, one of the prosecutors, like asks him a question and something gets miscommunicated or Leslie shuts him down, and then the jury like laughs, and then he kind of like smiles and looks at them. And those moments fed me a lot and they just reminded me of his innocence and his youthfulness and how he really is just like he says in the Barbara Walters interview, like he's just a kid.
I feel like you guys could teach a course on the Menendez case at this. Like
I definitely could.
the way you're just coming out with the lines, it's steeped in you, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been a while now.
Yeah, and it's not always that you get as much prep time as
Yeah.
we did. You know
We
what
had
I mean?
we had the strike.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we had the benefit of some time before we had to go shoot.
How much of that time were you trying to build the brotherly dynamic? Like, how did you sort of come together and figure out how do we play them separately, but also how do we play them together?
We didn't really. We waited until we started, and then it was really in our rehearsals and in the shooting of it that we found it. I think we really took the time to prepare individually and to get our own sort of sense of our characters that we were going to play. And then I think that benefited us because then we came together really, really prepared and ready to play. And so we didn't really create it together. It just sort of became an organic process that was really natural. And yeah, I think the sort of reality of how it was happening also was what brought us together. You know, we both had never experienced doing a giant, TV show like this, especially like what you said with the pressures of having them be real people, and with, it's Netflix, there's a lot of eyes. And so I think,
Having someone go through that.
yeah, we were both experiencing the same thing at the same time, which I think allowed us to bond and be have that sort of close relationship.
How does Ryan Murphy talk to you about?
How does Ryan Murphy talk to you?
End of question.
He doesn't like when people imitate him, so I'm not going to do that.
That's true. He's great. He came to our initial callback, which we didn't know that he was going to be at, and he came about, I'd say like 20 minutes early just to like field any questions that we had and make sure that we felt comfortable. So like that's how he started, you know. And then throughout the process, I mean, he was just making sure that we felt well supported, you know, like would take us out to like the occasional dinner, that sort of thing. And then
He gave
you know,
us
I think-
IV drips if we were feeling ill.
And
Like
if-
there was one time
My boss never does that.
yeah, maybe you just need a new boss. Ryan Murphy.
like,
should be your
excuse
boss.
me, so I need the Ryan Murphy treatment.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, like there was one time when we were filming at the prison and I ate something or like I got really sick for a day and then he would, you know, he sets up he has an IV guy who comes and or if we were just feeling really run down because it's long hours, you know, it's 5 days a week of shooting and
It is interesting working with him though, because I mean, he just drops by. But do you
Yeah.
notice how he always drops by when it's like a really important scene that you
Yeah.
know he wants it to be perfect? You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
he'll drop by sometimes when he has like a really specific vision for how he wants something done, which is cool to be directed by him as well.
Well, I was going to say, what's a note from Ryan Murphy that stands out to you about your performance of do this more, dial it down here?
I remember in the beginning, which freaked me out so bad. I thought I was going to get fired. I kept hearing from like people on set, and then finally like I had a call with him that I was crying too much, and I was like, "But that's in the script. Like that's what is happening. Like it's not my fault. Like I'm just doing what they're saying in the script." And they're like, "Well, we're changing the script. We're rewriting it." And I'm like, "But actually, like that's literally the character. Like they say on the stand, like." Why were you always crying? Like, why were you crying so much? Why were you always so emotional? And so I was like, that's what I'm doing. But I remember feeling like, oh God, like, oh no.
No.
But then it
You
ended
wanted
up,
to cry.
it was actually one of our first conversations that we ever had. I was like, there's a lot of crying in the script. Like, I'm going to have to find a lot of different ways to be crying, like hysterical, silent, shameful crying or scared crying or like all different kinds of emotions. But yeah, I remember being like, oh God, like, oh no, like I'm emoting too much.
Right. Did he or anyone else advise you against reaching out to the brothers in the process leading up to the show? And when did you decide, I think it's time?
It was more so just a collective conversation that we all had. Yeah, I mean, because honestly, I think Cooper and I both just wanted to come from as informed as a perspective as we possibly could, but it was a conversation that we had with the whole team. And yeah, ultimately, we decided that it would best to wait until after we had wrapped principal photography.
Because there was the moment where Eric criticized the show
Yeah.
on Facebook and said it was sort of inaccurate, the details to their lives. How soon after did you connect with him, and what can you share about what those conversations were like?
I spoke with him for the first time the night before the show came out, which was wonderful. And I really wanted that connection just before because I knew that there was going to be some issues that they have, as well as the family was going to have their own sort of criticisms and fears and problems because it's like, it's their lives. So, and we were also not doing a, straight defense, Menendez defense show. It was like we're giving all of everybody gets their turn to sort of share what they believe happened. And so, yeah, and then I think I saw him that weekend. He had just started to hear like good things about some of the parts in the episodes and about episode 5. And so, yeah, I mean, I just told him I get it, it's really difficult and it's difficult to see that stuff. I also think there was a lot that because he hadn't seen it, but there was a lot that people were hearing and saying, and it was being taken out of context. Like all of the for example, like Dominic Dunn's stuff was, people were taking it out of context being like, oh, well, this is in the show, so that means that they're saying that this is what happened, which is not true. We were showing his point of view and perspective, which was neither true nor false. I mean, I have my own opinions of what I think was true or false, but, that was what we were doing. We weren't being like, these are the facts, this is what happened. It was like, no, that's what this person thinks. And so I think people really took that and ran with it and were ready to sort of jump in and defend, which I love. But also, it's like, no, let's take it back, wind it back, watch the entire episode, don't skip through it, and see sort of why this is being told this way.
What were you least prepared for coming into these roles and the media attention that would surround the dramatization of this real life case?
I think the ups and downs of it all. Like, I'll get real with you for a sec. Like, there's the show coming out, it comes out, there's all this attention, there's all these things that we're now going to and having these interviews and going here and going there and all this attention and people starting to recognize you and like all of this stuff. And then there is this sort of like postpartum feeling of like, okay, like now what? Like I've felt a roller coaster of feeling really proud of the work and really happy and so grateful, and then periods of like, oh, this feels weird. Like why do I feel anxious or sad or confused or scared or, and then the next week then I'm like, oh, like I'm okay. And then things feel normal. And it's such a roller coaster of emotions and just newness, like it's just such a new experience. And
It comes at you
Yeah.
really fast.
Yeah.
And because it is a roller coaster and the highs are so intense, whenever there's like even the slightest lull, you know what I mean? Whether it's like there's no news about the case or something like that, whatever it is, there's so much displaced energy,
Yeah.
right? Because you still are feeling all of that from the high, and then it almost like crashes and you don't know what to do with it, So it's like, it's wanting to feel some sort of ball moving forward type feeling, like whether it's like the news that we just got or whatever that might be. But that can't happen every day.
I'm curious your thoughts of the public reception, because I was at the premiere and I remember the sort of discomfort some people had of like, should I be laughing at this part, like with Milli Vanilli? But then, later it gets so intense. But then
here comes the
also,
hard hitters. Get ready.
but then also, like you said, Ryan introduces this idea of the incestuous relationship coming from the point of view of Dominic. And there's this weird thing that you see on social media too, where people are like, having fun with that aspect. And
That Nicholas Chavez edit.
yes, the Nicholas Chavez. But
Wait, which edit?
there's so many.
There's one, the big one.
There is a lot.
Yeah, history repeats itself.
But when you're reading the script, are you sort of concerned? I mean, you can't predict how it's going to be received, but are you sort of like, are we going to lose the nuance in this age of memes and social media of like the gravity of this?
I think that that's always a concern,
Yeah.
right? I mean, like it's like a lot of fast food media, right? But I think that the great news is that a lot of people watched the show and watched the show start to finish. And I think that, while there were a lot of different perspectives that were shared, I think a lot of people took away from it that there were a lot of really hurt and wounded people involved, not just from the brothers, but also the parents, you know what I mean? And that's a really important takeaway.
I want to talk about one of the standout episodes, which was The Hurt Man. And I want to connect it to what you were talking about earlier about Lyle in the courtroom. But first, let's start with that episode it seemed incredibly challenging. It's like basically a one shot. I know you did several takes, and I think they used the last one. But talk to me about preparing for something like that. What does the night before that look like? How do you pregame doing something so intense?
I had so much time. I had 8 months with those words, and I read it every day. I wrote it out a lot. I guess I remember like the day of, I went to Ari's house before, because we kind of had a late call, and we just like did a read of it really flat, like no acting. Like we kind of just like said the words once to just like get them out. I was so nervous to do it because there's so much pressure, but I was so prepared, and I was really excited to do it as well, because it it was his whole. I feel like my prep for the entire show was working on that episode, and so to finally get to do it was so rewarding and thrilling. And it was just me and Ari, and we had built such a strong friendship at that point that it was just so exciting. And I also knew that we had a second day planned to do it again if we needed to. And so I was like, okay, well, if I suck the first day and I can't and I don't get it, then at least I have another day to get it. And so that gave me comfort. But, it's like, I mean, there's no one else. It's just you guys. The camera doesn't move. It's for 33 minutes. So the pressure of that and just wanting to get it right and one, to get it right for the show, but also just do good by Eric was like sitting with me. And I remember I called my therapist in the trailer before, and I just started crying and was just like, I'm doing it. Like, I'm doing it today. And, he was so proud and was like, gave me really nice words. And it was a super special day and time. And
So you were able to sleep the night before. You weren't hurling
I don't
the day
remember.
of.
I don't remember the night before, really. I just remember the day of, and then I don't remember. I might probably slept. I was probably tired from the day before, from when we were shooting whatever we were shooting that day. I don't remember.
That's the thing that's so funny is like I get asked this question sometimes, like how do you decompress in between days? I'm
You're like-
sometimes you don't.
You
like
black out.
yeah, like you
It's
just kind of
just,
gotta
like,
roll
gone.
one into the next. Yeah.
There were times too when I would get home and I wouldn't even turn the light on. I would just get in bed
Crash.
and go to sleep.
Yeah.
Yep.
What's interesting is to juxtapose that, which is, we're seeing Eric at his most vulnerable and we're really getting the backstory of what's happened. And then there's Lyle, who's very much about the performance, whether it's at giving the eulogy at his parents' funeral or in the courtroom. He's aware that how we come across in the courtroom is so important. We have to really think about this. Talk about that and how that sort of informed you giving Lyle's testimony.
Well, Lyle's testimony is a very unique thing. We because we talk a lot about Lyle's mask, right? And feeling the need to represent yourself as your father, or feeling the need to represent yourself as someone who's more successful or smarter than you are. And who could blame him? You know what I mean? Like when you're operating at such a terrible developmental disadvantage because of sexual abuse. I mean, that's nothing short of heartbreaking. But also because of the way that he grew up, he did have to kind of put his best foot forward always. And in episode 4, we get a little bit of that backstory, right? But then in episode 7, the mask drops not just for his attorneys, but for the whole world. And that particular section of the court TV footage, in my opinion, I think you're seeing the real Lyle there. And it's absolutely heartbreaking to watch him actually take that mask off in front of everyone. And so it hit me really, really hard. And it's that spot in episode 7, I think, is very truthful to him and very truthful to his experience.
Before I let you both go,
What? We have to be done?
We're done.
What?
I'm sorry.
Come on.
We can make it a therapy
that
session.
Wasn't long enough.
Oh, God. Okay, I'll see myself out.
I'm curious, it's been a while since you guys wrapped production, but obviously you're still doing press for the show, talking about it. Do the characters still feel active to you in your mind, or have you put it to rest?
For me, they did way longer than I was able to give it credit for. I mean, I think it's pretty flush now. I think you always carry some symbol of the character with you. You're always kind of married to it in some way, shape, or form for the rest of your life. But certain behavioral aspects or ways of thinking that just sort of creep their way into your psyche, those hang out longer than you might think. And so I don't think I was fully stepped out until maybe the end of January, which would have been 7 or 8 months after we wrapped filming. Yeah.
I think I always tried to make it a priority and a practice to really step in and really step out, even while we were shooting. And yeah, I don't think I ever really had any parts of what I had inhabited left with me. I think I left that when I left the sound stages, and that was very painful and sad. And yeah, I don't think anything's been left with me except for just the love and care and support that I feel for both of them. And I talked to Eric yesterday, and he, it's I just think he'll always be a part of my life, and he's so excited and passionate about this next chapter of his. He was just saying how his whole mission and what he wants to dedicate his life to is doing this prison reform and making huge change for people who also have LWAP, who he knows. It's like, I think a lot of people think that like, oh, they're just going to get out of prison and then they're going to have their lives back and they'll go off. And like, no, they're going to be so involved in the prison system and trying to make a lot of change. Green space is still going to happen. He's still going to teach his programs. He's still going to be going to the prison a lot. And he's just so passionate about, that's what he wants to do. And that was just so inspiring and beautiful. And I want to help him in any way I can. So if anything's left with me, it's just that, which I'm so thrilled about. As he would say, he's jazzed. He kept being like, I'm so jazzed about it.
Jazz.
Yeah.
That feels very 90s.
Yeah.
Well, it was really great speaking with both of you, and congratulations on the season. Well
Thank
done.
you.
Thank
Great
you.
to talk with you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having us.
Coming up after the break, Mark's interview with Diego Luna.
For the Los Angeles Times and The Envelope, I'm Mark Olson, and I'm here today with Diego Luna, executive producer and star of the series Andor. Diego, thanks for being here today.
Mark, thank you for having me.
As a way to start talking about this current season of Andor, this season in particular just feels very kind of plugged into things that are happening in our real world right now. There's, immigration sweeps for undocumented workers. There's a conversation about whether or not certain events should be even called a genocide. Was that a product of the production delays that were caused by the Hollywood strikes? Or like for you, that sense of like right now-ness, where do you think that comes from in the show?
I like answering this question this way. Imagine the show coming out 10 years ago. You would probably say the exact same, and you would find the reference to that day. Mm-hmm. And you would be like, oh my God, are you talking about this and this issue? Are you talking about the relation between Mexico and the States? Are you talking about da, 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 da? And then probably it'll work in another 10 or 20 years, The sad thing is that we repeat ourselves. And this is based in, obviously, there's so many reference that we had and that Tony had in mind when he was writing, that we had in the whole production process and the design of the series, and it's full of references of our past and the history we went through, the history we learned, and all of that is there, right? And when you are honest in the writing, when you are someone like Tony Gilroy that is very well informed and that works really hard in finding a reason for everything, then it becomes relevant, But I think it's about that. It's just good, fine writing that pays attention to detail and to human behavior, and we tend to repeat ourselves, and history repeats, and sadly we don't get it, sadly we don't seem to learn from what happened before, and we keep, hitting the same issues and the same problems, and I think the series is very relevant because it's made with care, and we want to talk about things that matter to us, and therefore, this can matter to others, and you suddenly, in the best possible way, use this screen as a mirror, and you go like, wow, they're talking about what I just read on the news, and you go like, no, not really. We were not trying to predict the future. If something, we were reflecting on our past.
Because I think it gets to the heart of part of what I think is so special about the show is that This is the streaming prequel to a movie that was itself a prequel to a movie that's almost 50 years old now. There's no reason there's no reason for the show to be as good as it is and to be as well made as it is. Like it could very easily
That's a good way to start. Like, how did you manage to do this?
Have you been surprised by the response to the show in that it has not just been for the Star Wars faithful, it has reached, critically with awards voters, it's kind of reached a whole other audience from just sort of like Star Wars folks.
I think differently, man. I'll put it this way. Rogue One happened almost 10 years ago, 11 years ago. In fact, we started working on that. It was a film that was meant to be different, to come out of nowhere, to like be unique in the universe of Star Wars, to have a beginning and an end, a very definitive ending also, and to have characters that normally you don't pay attention to in this universe, like the all those wonderful stories behind behind this rebellion that you don't get to listen, that you're not aware of, and the film came out, and audiences really responded and really like embraced the film and went to the cinemas and they watched, and the film reached audiences all around the world. And then Lucasfilm said, let's bring something like that, but in the universe of like these long format pieces that Star Wars was about to start working on, and so we were meant to be different. We were meant to be more grounded, more greedy, more political, more complex and mature. That was the idea. We were really hoping to deliver something that you would describe as a different thing in this universe, and that you would say like, wow, this is something I wasn't expecting, right? I mean, that was the exact goal of our show. What am I messing up?
I can handle more than you think.
Which is why you're awake every other night.
I'm not Marva. I'm not your sister. I can... Seriously. I can handle it.
What am I messing up?
You didn't kill that boy because we're at war. You killed him because he saw my face.
What's the difference?
I don't know.
The cast tells you clearly that what we're looking for is for a very realistic approach, and we were gonna use this long format to actually be patient and witness the intimate life of regular people, and we had like Andor is a beautiful excuse to tell the story of a revolution. How does a revolution happen? What's the political climate, social climate that has to like coexist in order for an insurrection to appear, And so we were hoping to do that in the first season, and then people celebrated the show for those reasons, Not for something else. People celebrated the show for the same reasons we decided to do it. And I mean, you don't get a writer like Tony Gilroy and you don't give him all the support and freedom to execute something if you're not looking for this, I wouldn't be there, you wouldn't have like, Stellan and I mean that I'm not gonna say names because the cast is a beautiful cast and very talented and complex actors that are looking for deepness, and the show is aiming for that. So I think I'm really pleased with the response. Obviously, it's not, I don't give it for granted, obviously, but we were hoping to get that. Like we worked on this show like we do film, we put together, it takes 2.5 years to do a season, For us is the work of 4 movies, basically. We dedicate that amount of time, and then we have directors that have integrity, that have a perspective, a point of view, and that comes into the mix too. So yeah, no, I think we worked really, really hard to get here, and I'm very proud of what's happening.
And can you talk a little bit about the structure of this season? I mean, I don't know of another show that's quite done this before, where it's being released in these 4 blocks of 3 episodes each, where there's sort of a writing directing team that takes on those blocks. It does present one single arc, but it also, you can tell me if to you it feels like 4 little movies along the way. Like, for you, what were the benefits of having the season structured like this?
Well, I'll tell you the whole story. I mean, we found ourselves, like, we were half the way on shooting season 1, and we had a moment. Tony and I, we were shooting in Scotland, and we were talking about how, like, it was just impossible to pretend to do 5 seasons of this. The idea was always to do 5 seasons. Each season was going to be a year before we get to Rogue One. The 5 years before Rogue One, that's what the story was going to cover. So the first season covers the first year or the 5th year, and then we talked about, like, well, we have to somehow get to the beginning of Rogue One without turning myself into 60 years old and pretending to be this guy. So we were already shooting in blocks. Sana, the amazing producer, the one that builds the machine that can actually execute this show. She's structured everything in 4 blocks. So each block has a director, and one block prepares and starts to shoot, then half the way the other is prepping, and then starts to shoot, and that way we cover these 12 episodes. So we were already shooting like that for production reasons. So then Tony said, like, what if we do 4 blocks and each block is a year? And that was the moment where we said, like, okay, that's it. That way we can deliver what we promised, which is the full story, all the arc of these characters till the moment Rogue One starts, and make sure we can do it in another season, and also another season that would have the same amount of work of pre-production that the first season had. Like, we were not gonna rush things. We knew that was a rhythm. We knew, like, the design takes time. Shooting in stages takes time. They need to be designed and built, and then you have to work on them, and then bring them down and build something else, and then work on that one. So and then there's another really cool thing about the blocks, that it got better shaped on this second season, which is then directors can come in and actually bring something, and Tony is he knows collaboration better than anyone, and he gives all the tools needed for us to execute, all the tools that a director needs, and they work really hard. I mean, the pre-production of each block takes 3 months of work. So the director arrives to the show 3 months before they start to shoot. That's like a movie. I mean, that's the amount of time you prep a movie sometimes, So directors have enough time, to get ready. But once they're ready to execute, Tony leaves them alone. There's no writers on set, It's not like other shows of TV where you have a writer on set checking, or like directors own their process. Once they're directing, they have producers behind them to support them, and we are there, but it's their job to deliver, and producers are watching dailies and commenting and supporting, but there's a moment where directors can bring really their perspective, their point of view into the mix, and I think that all of that makes this show special, at least in the world of TV. I mean, I'm not an expert. I just did another TV show before, also 2 seasons, but this one works very different, and it does feel that those blocks have kind of like a beginning and an end, a perspective, a point of view, a director, a team, and then as an actor, you are what's linking them. You're the one who moves from one to the other, reminding directors where you're coming from, what's happening, and so yes, us as actors, the team, we glue them together somehow.
And one thing I appreciate so much in the show is how it's about these big transformative moments can really be boiled down to just individual people, and sort of like really small things are what create bigger events. And there's a wonderful moment just in the very first episode. Your character has to give kind of a little pep talk to a woman who's sort of new to the rebellion, and you say to her, "You're coming home to yourself." And I found something really beautiful and inspiring in that moment. And can you talk a little bit about that and what that kind of meant to you as an introduction to where Cassian's at as this season begins? Like, he's seems much more committed to the rebellion. He's really made a turn from where he was in the first season.
You made this decision long ago. The Empire cannot win. You'll never feel right unless you're doing what you can to stop them. You're coming home to yourself. You've become more than your fear. Let that protect you.
Thank you.
This series and both seasons are full of those lines that you go like, my God, I mean, this guy, he's just like, he nails it, He has these characters in this season, but also in the first one, have these beautiful monologues and beautiful lines that they deliver about what it means, to get involved, to join, to be part of a community, to believe in change. Anyway, so yes, I think one thing that this season, and it was the risk of the structure, is that we have to fill the blank spaces, right? There is so much we don't see that we as audience and we also as performers, we have to fill, and we have to find enough information in what we see to understand what happened before. And I think that's another great thing that this season has. When you hear that speech, you understand what that year was for him. The learning he had to go through. You see a lot of Luthen there. Suddenly he's learning from the best, and he has become like a strong figure in this movement and for this team, and he is finding the leader that he can become. He has also that kind of like beautiful quality of actually giving time to people. It tells you a lot about how open he is, how much he has changed since the last time we saw him, and how important it was to commit after what happened in Ferrex in season 1. But it's like that. The whole season is full of those moments. At the end of that block, and I mean, I like talking about blocks and not episodes, probably because, I think it's really cool that you can see 3 episodes at a time, every week. I think it's nicer to have like 2 good hours or more of story to see. But I love that he as soon as we see him out, he grabs and free to communicate with the outside world in the episode 3. He calls home, and when we understand that home is Biggs, you get the whole picture, like what this year was, and so all the answers are there in the dialogue or in the actions. And it's cool because it challenges audiences to go like, wait a second, what? Oh yes, I get it. And it's there. If you go back, you go like, oh yeah, it's true. The answer was there.
And now, as much as we can make the show sound very heady and cerebral, it still is like a really exciting action show.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
I mean, all the scenes on the planet of Gorman, I mean, for a while it's like a really cool, like kind of wartime thriller, and then it builds to what I think is episode 8, that just really huge scale kind of like riot and sort of action sequence. What was shooting something like that like? That whole episode just seems like it would have been really strenuous to do.
Yes, definitely. It has that scale. We pay attention also to all that action you expect in a Star Wars show. The adventure is there. The and the size, the scale of the show, as you just said, is huge. It's a big production, and it happens also because of the way we shoot it. Like, we shoot it old school. We work with the stunts for weeks. We put everything together. Things blow. There is effects that are actually just there. Special effects on set, and we spend a lot of time working on making those moments actually happen. And yes, there is excitement. There is like it is about a revolution, and it's charged emotionally, but it doesn't stay there. It just like it also has this level of adventure that you're expecting in Star Wars. And I think we can have that because revolutions are also romantic. They are. There's also something naive and romantic and young about them. The idea of change being possible, and the hope and the excitement is there. But you said episode 8, and it's very sad. What we see there is I mean, it's sad. And shooting that was very intense. Very intense physically also, for all of us. But we have an amazing team, and the stunts, for example, it's and Mark Melly he doesn't just choreograph, he tells story with the way all of these events happen, and you can see the different factions, that make this rebellion exist, and all of like the different kind of training and background of characters you can see in the choreographies and in the fights. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
One of the things that I think does also make this series so interesting within the sort of world of Star Wars is the way in which so much attention is still given to the Imperial characters. And like, I know I myself am surprised when I'm watching the show how emotional I feel and how attached even I become to some of those characters, like particular Denise Goff's character of Dedramiro. What happens to that character in particular is just devastating. And I was shocked watching it that I like felt for her as much as I did. Has that been something that's been important to you or that matters to you? Is that
and Cyril,
and
Cyril, and again on episode 8, of course. I mean, this is about a revolution, and there's sides on a revolution, and both make sense for those who were there, like, and there's stories that matter in both sides. And you have and Tony doesn't judge characters. There's no good and bad, I mean, Cyril is a romantic. Yeah, if you go through his story, he's a true romantic, and he believes, but he can see very little. That's his problem, I guess. But he has a purpose. He's in a search, and characters are rounded, and we take time to witness both sides of the equation, without judging, and then I think that makes the show very rich and interesting, and unique again, because normally you hear about good and bad people, and the world is not like that, and that's why this show has that feeling of a realistic piece about history, somehow, because when there's moments where you can almost forget that you're in this galaxy far, far away, and you just see human behavior, and revolutions are very diverse, and very rich in terms of characters. This one is definitely. So I think that's one of the smartest approaches, that the storytelling of this project has, and that's totally Tony Gilroy's perspective. If I'm gonna talk about revolution, we gotta talk about everything around the revolution. That social climate I was talking about before, where there's like people that are actually motivated to move forward with their beliefs, and that happens in both sides. Yeah.
This second season of Andor, you all have said that it's sort of the end of the story because it bumps up against
it's not the
Rogue One.
The end is Rogue One.
Okay, right.
Of Cassian's story.
But now, is there any chance of like finding a way to tell more story with Cassian? Could there be a third season?
No. I mean, a third season of this show is impossible. It had to be another show, no? But this show, I mean, you've seen the end, no?
Mm-hmm.
Well, this show ends where it ends, and the only way to keep seeing Cassian is playing Rogue One. There is nothing else. I don't know, when I finished Rogue One and people ask me, but is there a way you can come back? I was like, no, there is no way, right? There's no way I can come back. I mean, we have an ending. The beauty of that film is that the ending happens, and it delivers that definitive sacrifice this team does, for the rebellion, and that's it. And I thought that was it.
But now for you,
now I can tell you again the same answer, and we'll see what happens.
But having lived with this character and in this world now for 10 years, what is it like for you to be leaving it behind?
Well, it's gonna stay with me forever. The films and now with platforms, they're there for me to watch and for new audiences to find it. But also, it's important. It's important to close things, And I love the idea of finishing something like Andor and saying goodbye to this character in a moment like this one, where I'm so pleased of what I've made. In a moment also where I'm so proud, and I am so attached to the community that I work with. It's beautiful to finish this way, I mean, and it should be sad and it should be difficult, because that means it's special and unique. I can't compare this experience to anything else I've done. I've never been part of a project for 10 years. I have never been part of a team that experienced a whole decade together. This is unique in my life, and because of that, it's beautiful that it ends in a positive note, in a moment where we're all happy to see each other, and we are excited to celebrate what we've done, and that's it. And then I have to move on, and find something else, and try again, and tell another story, and find another character.
Well, the series is Andor. Diego Luna, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
That's going to do it for this week's episode. Be sure to tune in next week when we have Catherine Hahn, along with Amy Sherman Palladino and Dan Palladino. Don't miss it.